In this next session, we're going to take a look at resits and resubmissions with Peter Taylor and Liesl Finley-Clifford. Now, some students need to resit because they don't pass the end of module assessment or the examinable component. Now, we started today saying, actually, if you get through the end of something, you've achieved something phenomenal just by getting through. And I was talking to one of my students the other day who hadn't passed, and she'd done some brilliant work. She just hadn't answered the question that was set. And so, of course, she didn't pass, despite that being very good. But needless to say, resits and resubmissions can sort of be accompanied by a sense of failure, understandably so for students, and some students may not really want to submit. So, Peter, what are some of the sort of key issues around this whole area, and why is it important that we have this session here to talk about some of these things?
Well, I think, you know, if you do kind of fail an exam or fail an EMA submission, it's not the end of the world. So you do have this opportunity to resubmit, to resit the exam, but there is a 7 week gap, 6 or 7 week gap, which you've got to kind of to improve your performance. And so you need to think about, how am I going to improve my performance compared to last time? So one obvious thing is to phone up the SST and kind of say, how can you help me? You know, is there some way in which I can have access to somebody who can talk me through? I can talk through some of the things I think I did well or things I didn't do so well, on ways in which I can improve. Another thing is that all of, if it's an exam, the past exam papers are available free on the OOSA website, so you can kind of download some past papers. Just try, you know, you've taken one and you've got a feel for what it looks like, so you can now try to a few more others. And often there are a module kind of resit forums, so that there'll be some discussion around how to approach the resit for a particular module. Sometimes there are resit tutorials. So make sure you engage and find out what support there is for you in that space.
I always find it interesting that we're so terribly British about this whole sort of thing, and, you know, the failure associated with it, and sometimes the shame. But ultimately, you know, it's a piece of assessment, and you're not going to pass if you don't answer the question. And no matter how brilliant some of the stuff you put into it is, if you don't answer the question, it's just not going to get there. But yet there's so much sort of accompanying that. And Liesl, for students, how do they tend to react to this? And you know, do you find that they just say, OK, fair enough, I'm just going to answer the question this time and take all the support, or do they shy away from it?
No, when you recall, we've just had sort of the exam results come out, and obviously, unfortunately, some students have been successful in the element of their EMA or their exam, and they're normally really distressed and sort of quite upset. They're normally quite shocked that actually it's quite a shock, because they're planning on their future studies. Are coming back in sort of our next presentation in October to sort of restudy their module. So it's lots of guidance and careful support around sort of what they're going to do now, sort of the impacts if they're on some of the framework of our qualifications that we're using currently that are being withdrawn, the implications to that, and how we can support them going forward. So once we've sort of supported them, we looked at what their module, because if they're entitled to resit they're going to resubmit their EMA, then we'll talk them through that process, going through to the module webpage when they get the advice when that will be open. Like we've just mentioned about the tutor group forums that students can access. We could possibly look at an individual study support session to help the student, if that's applicable to them, to find their tutor or a tutor to support them with sort of the things where they went wrong. If there's any particular circumstances that have impacted them on the way to their exam, we have a special circumstances form where there's sort of strict criteria that students need to meet, but they can access that through their webpage. But our job in the student support team as advisors and education advisors is to support the student through that process, identify what the problem is and how we can best support them moving forward.
So there are two things that tend to happen. If you're resitting something, that will be the examinable component, and you will need to retake an exam. And as you say, Peter, you can get a lot of support from the past papers. And then there's the resubmission, which is of an EMA, the end of module assessment. And often, but not always, that will be worked on based on the previous feedback that you get from the EMA. So you're reworking something that you've already started on.
It depends. It's not like that all the time. A lot of the EMAs, where there's a particular kind of project element, there will be some feedback, and then you will need to kind of rework the piece and resubmit it. And paying attention to the feedback, which may seem an obvious thing, you know, is something that often I see gets ignored. So I'm seeing students resubmitting an EMA, and the things that were highlighted they've not really dealt with. So that feedback is really quite crucial for them.
But it's difficult to take a step back, especially when something is so heartfelt and you've put a lot of heart into something, to be able to take a step back and say, how have I not met, how have I not answered this question ultimately?
It is, but it's important feedback. It's there to do exactly what it says, to feed back to you where the markers thought your weaknesses were. And therefore, you need to address those weaknesses.
So there's a lot of support out there, and you mentioned this time period as well. And there you're getting very good at sort of offering these, in certain circumstances, rapid resits or rapid resubmissions of things so that it doesn't have too much impact. It's not going to mean another year out necessarily. There are ways of catching up and resubmitting whilst continuing with your studies. Are many students aware of that? And, are they still registering then on their next modules?
Yeah, the students, if they're eligible for what we'd call a fast track resit, so if they're eligible to pick up and if they get the results in June and they're eligible for the resit in September, that they'll get that link on their student homepage, and all the information will be on there, and that will take them the link, and they need to look at their module homepage if they have to resit their EMA. And it's very important, like you've just said, to look at the feedback that you've been given and actually look on the homepage for the module to make sure the information for resubmitting the EMA is the same. So yes, students will get a resit, but they do have the option to, if they feel that they can't do it at that time, they can ask to postpone it to the next talk presentation of the module, but they can phone in and speak to us about that.
So the reason it's called a fast resit is because we try to handle it as quickly as possible to ensure that the student gets a result before they start their next module. So it has to all be handled very quickly, whilst giving the students sufficient time to do that kind of revision or reworking. So literally, in about a week or so from you actually taking your resit exam, you should get a result, which will be able to inform your next study.
Excellent. So nice. And I guess, in terms of what we were saying before with the assessment banking, things would be fresher in your mind if you did it. So even if you had an option, it would be better if you could to take the rapid option, wouldn't it?
It is. And it's often a problem that a student will get a resit and they think, I can't do the resit because I'm studying this other module and therefore I'll postpone it. And then when they come back to it, it's a year ago, they've forgotten all that stuff and have to then revise it all is hard work. So if you can get it done within the 6 or 7 weeks while it is still fresh in your mind, then that's the best option.
Excellent. Can we take some questions on postponement?
Yep.
HJ.
So Sarah has a great question. She's paused her study due to her health and is thinking about doing a 30 credit module next as maybe something more suitable, going from a 60 credit to sort of get back into study from that pause. Is that possible? Is that something you recommend?
It depends on whether there are 30 credit modules available that you can kind of handle in that way, because some of the named degrees have particular orders in which you may need to study, and they may just be 60 credits. So you might not have that flexibility. But if, say, you are doing an open program and where you could choose, then depending upon your kind of how you feel about how well you're going to cope with the study, then maybe coming back and doing 30 credits would be a good idea.
In that case, then, is there like a limit to how long you can bank your bank the assessments for? Do you have to do it in the next presentation, or can you do it for a bit longer if someone wants to do something else in the meantime, just get back up to speed?
If you want to use assessment banking, you have to return within 13 months to that module to complete to use those scores.
I think that's it. I think Sarah's happy. We'll check if there's any more questions to ask.
Sarah,
but
you haven't even mentioned her problems with her space bar, which I noticed you were frowning at, and the various suggestions and support out there to get your keyboard back on track. Although we've all agreed in the studio the mallet is definitely not the best option, certainly not for the next 10 minutes or so, Sarah, so stay with us. Okay, one thing I did want to just briefly talk about was penalties in terms of grades. Is there ever an extent to which things can be capped or a penalty if you have to resit?
Yeah, with module results for resits and resubmissions are normally capped. So if you do successful and in your resubmission, you normally awarded the lowest grade of pass, which is normally a grade 4 pass.
So what does that mean then? Do you still get feedback and a grade, but then it's just...
it'll be capped at a grade 4. So depending on however well you've done, it's capped.
So you still know how well you've done, you just won't get the grades for it.
Well, in the feedback, you get the description, but the grade, is the resubmission is capped at the level 4, which is the basic grade of pass in a resubmission.
However, if there are extenuating circumstances, so something may have happened which led you to do a poor exam or a poor EMA, and you send those special circumstances into the award board, they might say, well, we can't give you a pass based on this, but we can see that this has had a severe effect on your performance, and therefore we'll let you resit or retake the exam, and you don't have to have it capped. But that's why it's important to have sent in the special circumstances early on so that the award board can make that decision.
And someone said, is a lack of biscuits categorised as an extreme circumstance?
That would be quite a tricky one.
Especially if it was hobnobs.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So Peter, just to end then, what would your advice be to students who may be in this position right now?
So if you've been sent a letter saying, you've not quite passed, you've got a resit, or you've got to resubmit the EMA, I think the important thing is to make that initial contact, to maybe contact the SST to find out what's available, to look on the module site, just to engage. And it's what you said earlier on about this kind of way that we British would be, or well, I'm too embarrassed to tell people about it. But no, the resources are there to try and help you. One particular area which does worry me is around students who do really well with the continuous assessment, but don't take exams very well. They may get exam nerves or whatever. So maybe there's some things that we can do in terms of helping people to stay calm in exams, to be able to prepare themselves for the exam, which has nothing to do with the academic side, the revision. It's just about how you kind of cope with the process. So make sure you engage with the kind of SST to find out what's available.
What about you, Liesl?
I think that it's like you've just said, it's really important for students to talk to us about sort of any needs they have. There's lots and lots of supports and tips that we can give to students if they're worried about retaking their exam. They want some advice and guidance into sort of how they can best prepare. There's obviously the forums that are open. They do some of the modules will have revision forums that they can engage in, the past papers, but to talk to us if they're particularly worried about a particular element, if there's any disabled students out there. I mean, obviously this has to be planned well in advance, but we do have alternative arrangements that can be put into place. But obviously that has to be done, in plenty of time before the exam, and we have cut-off dates for those. But it would be really good for students to contact us and let us know if they have any worries at all. And we're always happy to speak to them.
Excellent. Well, Liesl and Peter, thank you so much for that session. That's been really, really useful. I hope we've answered all of your questions, and that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, today. It's been a summer of love in the chat room. I'm glad that you've been enjoying it. Stuart says it's been fun and helpful too. Jane says thank you, everyone, on and off screen, for being so inspiring. Sarah, I'm glad you're happy with all the support that you've had, and good luck sorting your keyboard out. And Bruce says he feels all warm and cosy and motivated by Student Hub Live. Well, that's the spirit. I see that all of you have enjoyed the event, and all of you are going to come back in September. So make sure that if you haven't already, you subscribe to our mailing list on the website. We'll then email you and tell you about the next events, which are going to be come up around the 18th to 20th of September. We've got our refreshers and orientation event for new and continuing students on the 3rd and the 4th of October, and lots of other sessions to gear you up and start getting ready for study. It's also good to see that the thing that's been most useful has been learning about progressing. I've really enjoyed listening to all your comments in the chat, and seeing how much you're supporting and caring for each other out there. HJ, final words.
I just think overall it's been fantastic. It's nice chatting with everyone. Everyone's been so lovely and sharing their tips and experience. And what I would just love to see is see everyone next time and just catch up with how everyone's doing. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and thanks for coming.
Lovely. So as I've said, make sure you subscribe to our email. Also, there's a feedback form on the website, which is very quick and easy to fill out. If you've got an idea about something you'd like to see, then do let us know. Also, if you're interested in coming to a Student Hub Live event, drop us an email, studenthub@open.ac.uk. We welcome everyone at these events, and we're currently working on our programme for the Refreshers and Orientation event. And it'd be great to have a couple of students coming along too. So if you'd be interested in coming to the studio in Milton Keynes, then do let us know about that. You can also keep in touch with us on Twitter and look at the catch up on the website that I hope will inspire you. There's lots of maths stuff out there Sue's been telling me to promote, so plenty to keep you busy and active over the summer. I'd like to thank all our guests who've been on the show today. We've had so much great content. I hope you found it useful. But unfortunately, that's all from us for today from the Student Hub Live team. So bye for now and see you soon in September.